I didn't know why a pack of attack dogs was chasing me through the rain, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Someone wanted me terrified enough to keep running and never look back. The worst part wasn't the barking behind me or the cold water soaking through my jacket. It was the fact that 20 minutes earlier, I'd been walking home from work like any other Tuesday, and now it felt like I'd accidentally stepped into somebody else's nightmare. My lungs burned as I sprinted across the deserted docks. Shipping containers towered around me like silent walls. The harbor lights blurred into streaks of gold through the rain. I risked one glance over my shoulder and instantly regretted it. The dogs were still there. Fast. Focused. Too focused. Not like strays. Not like animals that had randomly gotten loose. They moved with purpose. Like they had been sent. My shoe slipped against the wet pavement. I stumbled forward and barely caught myself before hitting the ground. Great. Fantastic. Exactly how every horror movie victim died. My breath came out ragged. My heartbeat hammered in my ears. Keep moving. Just keep moving. Except my body was reaching its limit. Another turn. Another stretch of empty dock. No people. No cars. No help. Then one of the dogs surged ahead of the others. My stomach dropped. I wasn't going to outrun them. The realization hit harder than the rain. I slowed. Just enough. Just 1 second of hesitation. The dog closed the distance immediately. Nope. The word left me in a pathetic gasp. I turned sharply, searching for anything. A fence, a door, a miracle. What I found was a dead end. A locked maintenance gate. My pulse stopped. The barking grew louder. Closer. The world seemed to narrow into cold metal bars and approaching pause. Then a voice cut through the storm. Down. Everything stopped. Not gradually. Not reluctantly. Instantly. The dogs froze. Every single one of them. Silence crashed over the dock, so suddenly it felt unreal. I stared. The dogs stared. Then they slowly lowered themselves to the ground as if obeying a command they had followed 1,000 times before. My brain struggled to catch up. What? A figure stepped out from the rain. Tall. Dark coat. Dark hair damp from the weather. He moved with the calm confidence of someone who had never once doubted a situation would go his way. The dogs didn't bark. They didn't growl. They simply watched him. My knees nearly gave out from relief. The stranger approached and offered me his hand. For a second I just looked at it. Rainwater slid from his sleeve. His fingers remained steady. Waiting. You okay? He asked. His voice was lower than I expected. Calm. Unhurried. Like stopping a pack of attack dogs was a completely normal part of his evening. I laughed once. A short, disbelieving sound. Do I look okay? One corner of his mouth lifted. Barely. Not quite a smile. Somehow that tiny expression made him seem more real. I accepted his hand. The moment our palms touched, warmth cut through the cold that had settled into my bones. He pulled me upright with surprising ease. Can you walk? He asked. I think so. Think or no? 50-50. His eyes flickered downward. I followed his gaze and noticed blood on my jeans where I'd scraped my knee during the chase. Nothing serious. Still, his expression tightened slightly. Concern. Genuine concern. Strange. We were complete strangers. Come on, he said. Let's get you somewhere dry. For reasons I couldn't explain, I trusted him immediately. Maybe because he'd saved me. Maybe because he was the first person who had looked at me all night like I mattered more than the problem. We started walking. The dogs remained behind. Watching. Waiting. Obedient. I kept glancing back at them. The whole thing felt impossible. Who are you? I finally asked. The stranger looked ahead. Declan. Just Declan. For now. That answer should have sounded suspicious. Instead, it somehow made me want to know more. We had barely crossed half the dock when headlights appeared through the rain. Several black SUVs rolled toward us. Expensive. Identical. Perfectly synchronized. Every instinct I had immediately screamed that normal people did not travel like that. The vehicles stopped. Doors opened. Men in dark suits stepped out. Not bodyguards exactly. Something sharper. More disciplined. One by one, they approached. And then something happened that made my stomach twist. They all lowered their heads toward Declan. Not dramatically. Not theatrically. Automatically. Like they had done it their entire lives. One of them spoke. Young Master Moretti. We've been looking everywhere for you. The rain seemed to vanish. The dock. The dogs. My scraped knee. Everything disappeared beneath a single realization. The man who had just saved my life wasn't some random stranger. He belonged to something much bigger than I understood. Declan's expression hardened instantly. He glanced toward me, and for the first time all evening, I saw something dangerous flicker behind his calm eyes. Then another suited man stepped forward and quietly added, "There's a complication, sir. The order concerning him has already been issued." Him. My blood ran cold. Declan looked at me. The man looked at me. And suddenly I couldn't stop wondering the same terrifying question. What order? The question echoed in my head during the entire drive. What order? Nobody answered me. Nobody even looked at me. The men in suits moved with the same quiet efficiency that made normal conversation feel impossible. One opened the rear door of an SUV. Another handed Declan an umbrella he immediately ignored. Rain continued soaking all of us equally. "Get in," Declan said. It was not a threat. It was not a command. Somehow that made me obey faster. The moment I slid into the leather seat, Declan followed and shut the door behind us. The city lights blurred across the rain-streaked windows as the convoy pulled away from the docks. Silence settled between us. Not comfortable silence. Not awkward silence. The kind that felt like standing in a room with a loaded question nobody wanted to answer. Finally, I looked at him. "What order?" Declan stared out the window. "You should not have heard that. That is not an answer." "I know." His jaw tightened slightly. "Then give me an answer." He exhaled slowly. For the first time since I met him, he looked tired. Not physically tired. Emotionally tired. Like somebody carrying a weight he had been holding for years. "The less you know right now, the safer you are." I laughed once. I was chased. Through a shipping yard by attack dogs. I think we passed the safe part hours ago. Something flashed across his face. Regret. Genuine regret. The expression disappeared almost instantly, but I saw it. That changed something. Up until now, I had assumed Declan belonged to whatever dangerous world was suddenly swallowing my life. Now I was beginning to suspect he might be trapped inside it too. The convoy drove for nearly 40 minutes before passing through a set of iron gates. Beyond them sat the largest private estate I had ever seen outside a movie. Stone walls. Massive windows glowing gold against the storm. Security cameras everywhere. The place looked less like a home and more like a fortress pretending to be one. "You live here?" I asked. "Sometimes." That answer somehow raised more questions than it solved. Inside, the house felt strangely quiet. Warm lighting softened the sharp architecture. Firelight flickered in distant rooms. Expensive artwork lined the walls. None of it felt cold. None of it felt showy. It felt lived in, which somehow made it stranger. A woman appeared almost immediately. Silver hair. Sharp eyes. She looked relieved the moment she saw Declan. Thank God. She crossed the room and touched his cheek. Not formal. Not professional. Personal. Maternal. "You disappeared again." Declan actually smiled. A real smile this time. Small but unmistakable. I nearly stopped walking. The intimidating man who controlled attack dogs and traveled with armed security apparently let an older woman fuss over him like he was 12 years old. "I am fine, Lucia." "You are always fine," she replied. "That is how I know something is wrong." Declan glanced toward me. "Can we get a first aid kit?" Her attention shifted instantly. She noticed my scraped knee, my wet clothes, my exhaustion. "Oh, honey." Before I could react, she was already guiding me toward a nearby sitting room. "Sit." I obeyed automatically. 5 minutes later, I found myself wrapped in a blanket while Lucia cleaned the scrape on my knee. It was absurd. Less than an hour ago, I thought I might die in a shipping yard. Now somebody was lecturing me about proper wound care. Across the room, Declan stood near the fireplace, speaking quietly into a phone. His voice remained calm, but his shoulders looked tense. Very tense. Then something unusual happened. One of the security guards approached him carrying a tablet. The guard looked nervous. Actually nervous. Declan glanced at the screen. Whatever he saw made his expression darken immediately. "No," he said. The single word landed like a door slamming shut. The guard hesitated. "Sir, the recommendation came directly from..." I said no. Silence. The guard lowered his head and stepped away. My stomach tightened. Not because Declan looked dangerous. Because he looked angry on my behalf. Later that night, after Lucia practically forced me to eat soup and drink tea, I was shown to a guest room larger than my entire apartment. I should have slept immediately. Instead, I wandered toward the window. The estate grounds stretched across acres of darkness. Security lights glowed along the perimeter fence. Everything seemed peaceful. Safe. Then movement caught my eye. Down below, near the courtyard, Declan stood alone beneath the rain. He thought nobody was watching. His phone was pressed against his ear. His voice carried faintly through the open crack in the window. I do not care what the order says. My heartbeat slowed. He stays under my protection. Silence. Then Declan spoke again. Quieter this time. More dangerous somehow. If anyone comes after Beckett, they answer to me. The line went dead. I froze beside the window. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The order was real. It was about me. And the man everyone seemed to fear had just openly defied it. Then Declan slowly lifted his head and looked directly toward my window, as if he somehow knew I was standing there. Our eyes met across the rain-soaked courtyard. And for the first time, I found myself wondering something far more dangerous than who wanted me. Why was Declan risking everything to protect me? Sleep should have been easy after everything that happened. Instead, I spent half the night staring at the ceiling and replaying the image of Declan standing alone in the rain. He had looked less like a powerful heir and more like someone trying to hold back a storm with his bare hands. By morning, I was running entirely on coffee and bad decisions. The bad decision arrived when I convinced myself I could quietly explore the estate and maybe find answers. In my defense, mysterious men issuing orders about me had severely damaged my ability to mind my own business. The house was even larger in daylight. Sunlight poured through enormous windows. Staff moved quietly through the halls. Nobody stopped me. Nobody questioned me, which somehow felt stranger than being watched. Eventually, I wandered into a library that looked older than some cities. Floor-to-ceiling shelves stretched across 2 stories. Leather-bound books lined the walls. A massive desk sat near the windows. I was about to leave when I noticed a photograph resting beside a stack of documents. The frame showed a much younger Declan, maybe 16 or 17. He stood beside an older man whose expression looked carved from stone. Even through the photograph, the resemblance was obvious. Same eyes, same sharp features, father and son, except Declan was not smiling. He looked exhausted. I picked up the frame before I could stop myself. You found his favorite room. I nearly dropped it. Lucia stood in the doorway carrying a tray with coffee and pastries. Sorry, I said quickly. I was not snooping. She raised an eyebrow. That was absolutely snooping. Fair point. I carefully returned the photograph. Lucia entered and placed the tray on the desk. Her gaze drifted toward the frame. Something softened in her expression. He used to spend hours in here. Declan. She nodded. When he was younger. I glanced back at the photograph. He does not look very happy. Lucia became quiet. He was carrying responsibilities most adults would struggle with. That answer lingered in the air. What kind of responsibilities? She hesitated. For a moment I thought she would refuse to answer. Instead she surprised me. The kind that come with being born into a family that expects obedience above everything else. I frowned. That sounds awful. A sad smile touched her lips. It was. Before I could ask more, footsteps echoed from the hallway. Declan appeared moments later. His tie was loosened. His sleeves were rolled up. He looked like someone who had already fought 3 battles before breakfast. His eyes immediately found me. Not the room. Not the coffee. Me. The strange thing was that I was starting to notice how often he did that. You are supposed to be resting, he said. You are supposed to be answering questions. His expression almost became a smile. Almost. Lucia wisely excused herself before either of us could continue. Once we were alone, silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable. Familiar. Which felt ridiculous considering we had known each other for less than 2 days. Declan poured coffee into a mug and handed it to me before making one for himself. The gesture was small, automatic, thoughtful. I accepted it before realizing how natural it felt. Thank you. You are welcome. We stood near the window overlooking the grounds. For a while neither of us spoke. Then I noticed movement outside. Security teams. More than before. Twice as many. Maybe 3 times. Something happened. Declan followed my gaze. Maybe. That means yes. He sighed. You should have been a lawyer. I cannot afford law school. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Declan looked at me. Really looked at me. Student loans? Among other things. I shrugged. My mom got sick 2 years ago. Medical bills are not exactly a fun hobby. Something changed in his expression. Not pity. Understanding. How is she now? The fact that he asked surprised me. Most people did not. Most people heard the word hospital and immediately wanted to change the subject. Better, I said quietly. Still recovering. But better. Declan nodded once. Like that answer mattered. Like it genuinely relieved him. Then his phone buzzed. The screen lit up before he could turn it over. I only caught a glimpse, but it was enough. A file. My name. Beckett Hayes. Beneath it sat a long list of information. Address. Work history. Hospital records. Financial records. Everything. My stomach dropped. Declan immediately locked the screen. Too late. I had already seen it. You investigated me. The words came out sharper than I intended. Declan remained silent. How much? Do you know? I asked. Enough to keep you safe. That is not an answer. His jaw tightened. I know your mother spent 8 months in treatment. I know you worked 2 jobs to help pay for it. I know you nearly dropped out of college because of the bills. My chest felt strangely tight. Not because he knew. Because his voice carried no judgment whatsoever. Only certainty. As if those details mattered. As if they explained who I was. Why? I asked. Why would you look into my life? Declan stared out the window. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he spoke so quietly I almost missed it. Because when I realized who they were targeting, I needed to know whether you had anyone protecting you. The room suddenly felt very still. Discovery hit harder than any answer so far. He had not investigated me because I was dangerous. He had investigated me because he was worried about me. Everything shifted. Every assumption I had made about him tilted sideways. Then another thought surfaced. A worse one. If Declan had gone to that much effort before we even met, then this situation started long before the docks. Long before the dogs. Long before I knew his name. My pulse quickened. Declan, I said slowly. How long have they been watching me? For the first time since I met him, he looked away before answering. Declan did not answer my question right away. The silence stretched between us as sunlight spilled across the library floor. For a moment, I thought he would walk away. Instead, he set his phone on the desk and rubbed a hand across the back of his neck. The gesture felt surprisingly human, surprisingly vulnerable. Longer than I should have, he admitted quietly. I stared at him. That is not exactly reassuring. I know. His gaze dropped briefly, but it is the truth. Something about the way he said it made it difficult to stay angry. Not because the situation was normal. It absolutely was not. But because he looked like someone carrying guilt instead of pride. Most powerful people seemed eager to remind everyone how much control they had. Declan looked exhausted by it. Later that afternoon, the weather finally cleared. Lucia practically ordered both of us outside. According to her, fresh air solved everything short of actual death. I suspected she was exaggerating, but neither of us argued. The estate grounds stretched for acres. Gardens. Walking paths. A small lake reflecting the afternoon sky. For the first time since arriving, the place felt peaceful. Almost ordinary. We walked side by side without speaking much. Strangely, the silence no longer felt uncomfortable. I found myself noticing little things about Declan. The way he always positioned himself slightly closer to the road whenever we passed an open area. The way his eyes constantly scanned our surroundings without appearing obvious. The way he slowed his pace whenever my knee started bothering me. None of it felt performative. He was protecting me even when he thought I was not paying attention. Eventually, we reached a wooden dock overlooking the lake. The water shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. I sat down at the edge and stared across the surface. Declan remained standing for a moment before joining me. You ever think your life was supposed to go somewhere completely different? I asked. The question slipped out unexpectedly. Declan looked toward the horizon. Every day. I laughed softly. That was a suspiciously honest answer. You asked an honest question. Fair enough. I folded my arms across my knees. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an architect. An architect. I liked drawing buildings. I shrugged. Then life happened. Hospital bills. Extra jobs. Responsibilities. The words remained unspoken, but they hung between us anyway. Declan understood. Somehow I knew he did. After a long pause, I glanced toward him. What about you? His expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. I wanted to leave. I blinked. Leave? Everything. He looked out across the lake. The family. The expectations. The future people had already decided for me. For the first time, I could picture the younger Declan from the photograph. The one who had looked trapped instead of powerful. Discovery settled quietly into place. The man everyone obeyed had spent years wanting freedom himself. The realization did not make him seem weaker. It made him easier to understand. Why did you stay? I asked. A faint smile appeared, sad and warm at the same time. Because leaving is simple when you are only responsible for yourself. His eyes drifted toward me briefly before returning to the water. It becomes harder when other people get caught in the consequences. My chest tightened unexpectedly. We sat in silence after that. Not because there was nothing left to say, because some truths felt too heavy to interrupt. As the sun began sinking lower, a cool breeze swept across the lake. I shivered before I could stop myself. Immediately, Declan removed his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. The motion was automatic, thoughtless, natural. Our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved. The world seemed unusually quiet. I became aware of everything at once. The warmth of his jacket, the closeness between us, the way his attention never seemed divided when he looked at me. Something shifted. Something dangerous in the gentlest possible way. Declan's gaze dropped briefly to my mouth before returning to my eyes. My heartbeat stumbled. The moment stretched. Neither of us looked away. Then a phone vibrated somewhere behind us. Reality rushed back in. Declan exhaled softly and stood. The spell broke. Almost. Not completely. That somehow felt worse. That evening, we ended up in the library again. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Lucia had disappeared after delivering tea and a suspicious amount of dessert. The atmosphere felt calm, safe. For the first time in days, I was not waiting for disaster. Declan sat across from me reviewing documents while I pretended to read. Every now and then I caught him glancing up to make sure I was still there. Every time he did, something warm settled deeper inside my chest. Hours passed. At some point, fatigue won. I must have drifted off without realizing it because the next thing I knew, I was waking to the feeling of something soft being adjusted around my shoulders. A blanket. Declan froze when he realized I was awake. His hand remained lightly resting against my shoulder. Neither of us spoke. The contact lasted only a second longer before he pulled away. Yet somehow it felt more intimate than anything else that had happened. Get some sleep, Beckett, he said quietly. His voice carried a tenderness I had never heard before. I looked at him and realized something that should have frightened me. It did not. Against all logic, against all common sense, against every warning sign screaming that his world was dangerous, Declan had become the person I trusted most. The realization settled over me like warmth. Safe, certain, hopeful. And as I watched him return to his seat beneath the library light, I never noticed the folder resting partially hidden beneath a stack of papers, nor the single photograph inside it that showed Declan standing beside the very men who had been hunting me from the beginning. The feeling of safety lasted exactly 12 hours. That was how long it took for everything I thought I knew to fall apart. I woke up late the next morning and wandered downstairs looking for coffee. The house felt unusually tense. Staff moved faster. Security teams spoke in low voices. Something had changed. I found the answer by accident. Or maybe fate finally decided I had been comfortable for too long. I was cutting through a hallway near one of the private offices when I heard raised voices. Declan's voice. Sharp. Frustrated. I stopped immediately. You should have told him sooner, someone said. He was never supposed to stay this long. My stomach tightened. Declan answered first. He was not supposed to be involved at all. That stopped being true years ago. Years ago. The words hit me like ice water. I should have walked away. Instead, I remained frozen beside the door. He almost died because of that decision. The other man continued. You knew your father would never let it go. Silence followed. Then Declan spoke. I know exactly what my father would do. Something in his voice made my chest tighten. Not fear. Pain. Raw and exhausted pain. Footsteps approached. Panic shot through me. I stepped away just before the office door opened. A gray-haired man exited carrying a folder. He never noticed me. The folder slipped slightly beneath his arm as he passed. One photograph slid free and landed on the floor. The man continued walking. I picked it up automatically. My blood turned cold. The photograph showed my mother leaving St. Gabriel Medical Center 2 years earlier. I stared at it. My mother. The day she completed treatment. The date was printed on the back. 2 years ago. Long before the docs. Long before the dogs. Long before I met Declan. My hands started shaking. There were more photographs inside the folder. Me walking to class. Me leaving work. Me carrying groceries into my apartment. Months. Years. Entire pieces of my life documented by strangers. A voice behind me made me jump. Beckett. Declan froze when he saw the photographs. The color drained from his face. Neither of us spoke. We did not need to. The truth was already standing between us. How long? I asked quietly. He closed his eyes. Beckett. How long? This time the words came out sharper. Harder. Declan looked at the photographs. Then at me. 3 years. The hallway tilted. 3 years. 3 years. I repeated the number inside my head because it refused to make sense. 3 years ago was before my mother's treatment ended. Before half the struggles that had shaped my life. Before any of this. You have been watching me for 3 years? Declan took a step forward. Not the way you think. Then explain it. My voice cracked. Because right now it looks exactly like what I think. Pain flashed across his expression. Real pain. It did not matter. Not in that moment. The first file appeared after an incident involving my father, he said carefully. Your name surfaced unexpectedly. My name. You witnessed something. I laughed. A hollow sound. I do not even know anyone in your world. That was the problem. My chest tightened. Declan continued before I could interrupt. You saw something by accident. You never realized it. But my father believed you did. Suddenly pieces started rearranging themselves. The dogs. The surveillance. The order. The protection. None of it had started at the docks. That night had only been the latest chapter. So all of this happened because of your family. Yes. And you knew the entire time. His silence answered for him. The betrayal hit harder than I expected. Not because he had lied. Because I understood now that almost every meaningful moment between us existed beside a truth he had chosen not to tell me. The night in the rain. The phone calls. The investigations. The protection. Every memory shifted shape. You knew exactly who I was before we met. Yes. You already had my records. Yes. You already knew my mother was sick. His eyes lowered. Yes. The words shattered something inside me. Suddenly, every act of kindness felt complicated. Every moment of trust felt manipulated. I hated that part of me still wanted to believe him. Was any of it real? I asked quietly. That question finally broke him. Declan looked at me like I had struck him. All of it was real. How am I supposed to know that? He opened his mouth, closed it again. For the first time since I met him, he had no answer. Discovery settled into place with devastating clarity. Declan had not started protecting me after the attack. He had been protecting me for years. The dogs had not been random. The surveillance had not been random. Even our meeting was no longer what I thought it was. Everything traced back to the same hidden truth. Yet somehow the revelation only created a larger question. If Declan had spent 3 years secretly protecting me from his own family, why had he never told me? And if he truly cared about me, why did it suddenly feel like I had never known him at all? The next 2 days felt like living beside a ghost. Declan was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I saw evidence of him constantly. Fresh coffee appeared outside my room every morning. My favorite brand of granola bars somehow found their way into the kitchen. Security escorts quietly doubled whenever I stepped outside. Yet Declan himself remained distant. He never pushed, never demanded forgiveness, never tried to force another explanation. Somehow that made everything worse. Anger would have been easier. Resentment would have been easier. Instead, every reminder of his presence arrived wrapped in the same impossible question. If he had truly been manipulating me, why did every act of care still feel genuine? On the third morning, I decided I could not spend another day hiding. Inside the estate, I needed air, space, something that belonged to my life instead of his. One of the guards immediately offered to accompany me. I nearly laughed. Do I get a vote? The guard looked uncomfortable. Mr. Moretti requested that you never be alone. There it was again. Declan's invisible hand shaping my world without asking permission. My chest tightened. Of course he did. Still, I went for a walk. The estate gardens stretched beneath a gray afternoon sky. The fountains murmured softly. Roses swayed in the breeze. Everything looked peaceful enough to belong on a postcard. Unfortunately, my thoughts were far less picturesque. I kept replaying every conversation, every smile, every moment that had felt real. The worst part was that I still missed him. That realization annoyed me more than anything else. I was so distracted that I did not notice the uneven stone along the garden path. My foot caught. Pain shot through my still healing knee. Before I could hit the ground, a hand closed firmly around my arm. Strong. Familiar. My breath caught. Declan steadied me instantly. For one suspended moment, neither of us moved. His hand remained wrapped around my forearm. My fingers instinctively tightened around his sleeve. The contact felt devastatingly natural. Like my body remembered something my heart was trying to forget. "Careful," he said quietly. I looked up. His eyes searched my face immediately. Concern. Relief. Something deeper he was trying very hard to hide. Neither of us let go. Not right away. Then reality returned. I released his sleeve first. Declan slowly withdrew his hand. The loss of contact felt strangely sharp. "I am fine," I said. "I know." The answer landed softly between us. We stood there in silence. Two people separated by a truth neither knew how to cross. Eventually Declan nodded once and stepped back. "The doctor says your knee needs another week." I blinked. "You talked to my doctor?" "Yes." "Why?" His expression did not change. "Because I worry." The honesty stole every prepared response from my mouth. Before I could answer, a black SUV rolled into the driveway. Several men stepped out. I recognized none of them, but the atmosphere shifted immediately. The guards around us straightened. Declan's posture hardened. One of the newcomers approached quickly. "We need to talk. Now." Declan glanced toward me. Something unspoken passed through his eyes. Apology. Regret. Then he turned and followed the men toward the main house. I should have walked away. Instead, I found myself drifting closer to an open window overlooking the conference room. The voices inside carried faintly through the glass. "You cannot keep doing this," one man said sharply. "The board already voted." My stomach tightened. "Then they can vote again," Declan replied. "That is not how this works." Silence followed. Then another voice spoke. Older, colder. "You are giving up your position for a stranger." Every muscle in my body froze. "He is not a stranger." Declan's answer came immediately. No hesitation. None. The room became quiet. "Your father built this future for you," the older man continued. "And I am choosing differently." My pulse stumbled. I leaned closer without realizing it. If protecting him cost me my place in this family, then so be it. The words settled over me like thunder. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then chairs scraped against the floor. Panic shot through me. I stepped away from the window just before someone emerged from the room. My heart hammered all the way back to the guest wing. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at nothing. The conversation replayed endlessly inside my head. Giving up his position. Choosing differently. Protecting him. Me. The hidden sacrifice revealed only part of itself. I still did not know everything. I still did not understand why he had watched over my life for 3 years. But one truth became impossible to ignore. Declan was losing something enormous because of me. And I had never even known it was happening. That night, I found a handwritten note outside my door beside a cup of tea. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow may be difficult." No signature. None was needed. I stared at the note for a long time before setting it on my nightstand. Somewhere inside the house, Declan was still protecting me. Somewhere inside me, I still wanted to believe him. And that frightened me more than the distance growing between us. Because if trusting him had already broken my heart once, what would happen when everything finally fell apart for good? I did not remember the drive to the assembly. Later, I would remember fragments. Gray skies, white knuckles gripping the steering wheel. The folded announcement sitting on the passenger seat like a second heartbeat. Everything else blurred together. By the time I arrived, the gathering had already begun. The Moretti family headquarters looked less like a business complex and more like a monument to power. Black cars lined the entrance. Security stood at every doorway. Men and women in expensive suits filled the massive hall beyond. Conversations drifted through the air in low, controlled murmurs. Nobody smiled. Nobody looked relaxed. This was not a celebration. It was a judgment. I slipped inside unnoticed and moved toward the back of the room. Then I saw him. Declan stood at the front beneath the family crest. Dark suit, straight posture, calm expression. From a distance, he looked untouchable, unshaken. The same powerful air everyone expected him to be. But I knew better now. I knew what exhaustion looked like on him. I knew what sacrifice looked like on him. And for the first time, I noticed both. An older man stood beside him. The resemblance was unmistakable. His father. The room fell silent as the assembly officially began. One executive stepped forward and started speaking about leadership, responsibility, legacy, and the future of the organization. The words washed over me. None of them mattered. My attention remained fixed on Declan. Eventually, the speaker stepped aside. "Declan Moretti," he announced. "Before this family and this organization, do you accept your position as heir?" The room became perfectly still. Hundreds of eyes turned toward him. This was the moment. The future everyone expected. The future his father had built. The future he had been carrying his entire life. Declan stepped toward the microphone. For a second, he simply looked across the crowd. Then his eyes found me. The distance between us vanished instantly. His expression changed. Something softened. Something honest. I felt my chest tighten. "No," he said. The single word hit the room like thunder. Murmurs exploded immediately. Shock rippled through the audience. Declan never looked away from me. I refused the position. His father's expression hardened. Several executives stood abruptly. None of it mattered. Declan continued. "For years I was told that loyalty meant obedience." His voice remained calm, steady. "I was told that protecting the family required sacrificing anything and anyone necessary." Silence settled once more. I no longer believed that. The room erupted again. His father stepped forward. "Think carefully about what you are doing." Declan finally turned toward him. "I have been thinking carefully for 3 years." My breath caught. 3 years. Suddenly I understood. The hidden sacrifice. The investigations. The arguments. The protection. None of it began when I entered his life. He had been fighting this battle long before I knew it existed. Declan faced the crowd again. 3 years ago, an innocent person was placed under suspicion for witnessing something he never understood. My pulse quickened. Instead of correcting that mistake, people chose fear, surveillance, intimidation, pressure. The room remained frozen. I participated in protecting him. Pain crossed his face. But I also failed him, because I believed I could keep him safe without telling him the truth. The confession landed harder than any accusation. He was not defending himself. He was holding himself accountable. Then Declan did something nobody expected. He stepped away from the microphone, away from the stage, away from the future being offered to him, and walked directly toward me. Every eye in the room followed him. Mine never left his. He stopped only when he stood in front of me, close enough that I could see the exhaustion beneath his composure, close enough that I could see hope fighting against fear. "I should have trusted you sooner," he said quietly. The microphone still carried every word throughout the hall. "I thought protecting you meant carrying everything alone." Emotion tightened his voice. I was wrong. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The entire room disappeared. There was only him. "If I have to choose between this position and you," Declan continued, "I choose you." The words shattered every remaining wall inside my chest. Not because they were dramatic, because they were true. He had already proven it. 3 years of choices. 3 years of consequences. 3 years of sacrifice I never saw. His father stepped forward angrily. "You would throw away everything for him?" Declan answered without hesitation. "I already did." Silence followed. Then, for the first time, he reached for my hand. Not hidden, not private, public, certain. His fingers closed around mine. Warm, steady, real. Nobody in the room could misunderstand the choice he had made. Declan turned back toward the assembly. As for the accusations against Beckett Hayes, they were never justified. He handed several documents to the board members. Internal reports, archived communications, records showing that he was never involved in any criminal activity and never possessed the information my father feared. Executives quickly reviewed the evidence. Expressions shifted. Surprise, discomfort, realization. One by one, the foundation of the misunderstanding collapsed. Not because Declan attacked anyone, because he finally presented the truth. The truth he had spent years trying to protect me from. When the room settled again, something had fundamentally changed. The fear surrounding my name was gone. The suspicion was gone. The lie was gone. Declan still held my hand. Neither of us let go. For the first time since the docks, hope felt stronger than fear. The future remained uncertain. The family remained divided. The consequences of his decision had only begun. But standing there beside him, I realized something important. He was no longer choosing duty over himself. And he was no longer choosing protection over honesty. He was choosing us. Together. Whatever came next. 6 months later, the rain returned. Not a storm this time. Just a gentle spring shower drifting across the harbor like a memory that had finally learned how to be kind. I stood at the edge of the waterfront with my hands buried in my jacket pockets and watched. The city lights shimmer across the water. The air smelled like salt and possibility. A lot had changed in 6 months. Some days it still surprised me. The investigation surrounding my name had been permanently closed. Every accusation had been formally withdrawn. The records Declan revealed during the assembly proved what should have been obvious from the beginning. I had never been involved. I had never been a threat. I had simply been an ordinary person caught in the path of somebody else's fear. For years, that fear had shaped my life without my knowledge. Now it no longer could. The Moretti organization had changed too. Declan's public decision sent shockwaves through every level of the family structure. Some people supported him. Some never forgave him. But none of them could ignore him. The heir who walked away had forced conversations nobody wanted to have. For the first time, loyalty was no longer confused with silence. As for Declan himself, he kept his promise. He chose his own future. Not the one handed to him. Not the one demanded of him. The one he actually wanted. It turned out he was remarkably good at helping people when he was not spending all his energy surviving expectations. He now worked with several community programs focused on legal advocacy and family protection services. Every time I saw him speaking with someone who needed help, I understood something I had missed before. Declan had never wanted power. He wanted freedom. More importantly, he wanted other people to have it too. I smiled to myself as footsteps approached behind me. I did not need to turn around. Some things became as familiar as breathing. "You are early," I said. "You are 15 minutes early," Declan corrected. I laughed. That sounds suspiciously specific. I checked. Of course he did. I finally turned toward him. The sight still had the power to steal my breath sometimes. Not because he looked perfect, because he looked lighter. The constant weight he carried when we first met was gone. His smile came easier now. His eyes looked brighter, happier, real. He stopped beside me and held out a paper coffee cup. My favorite order. I accepted it automatically. "Thank you. You are welcome." The simple exchange felt oddly precious. 6 months ago, we barely knew how to speak honestly to each other. Now honesty had become the easiest thing in the world. We started walking along the harbor together. The rain continued falling softly around us. Neither of us rushed. Neither of us needed to. Somewhere along the way, I had learned an important lesson. Strength was not carrying everything alone. Strength was allowing someone to stand beside you when life became too heavy. For years, I believed survival meant independence. Then Declan arrived and shattered that belief completely. Not because he rescued me, because he stayed. Because he kept choosing me even when it cost him everything he thought he was supposed to be. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I glanced toward him. The first time we met. A faint smile touched his mouth. "The ducks. The dogs." He groaned softly. I was hoping we would eventually stop discussing the dogs. Never. "Excellent." His expression turned dramatically resigned. A lifelong commitment to dog-related embarrassment. I laughed harder than the joke deserved. Declan watched me with that familiar look. The one that always made me feel seen. Really seen. The laughter slowly faded. The moment remained. Rain drifted around us. The harbor lights reflected across the water. The world seemed to pause. "I owe you something," I said quietly. Declan frowned. "You do not owe me anything." "Actually, I do." I stopped walking. He immediately stopped too. "I never answered your choice." Understanding flickered across his face. The assembly. The moment he stood before his family and chose me. Publicly. Unconditionally. My heart beat a little faster. "You spent years protecting me," I said. "Even when I was angry. Even when I pushed you away. Even when I did not understand." Emotion tightened my throat briefly. And I think the reason it hurt so much when the truth came out was because I had already fallen for you. Declan stared at me. The rain continued falling softly around us. "Beckett." My name sounded different in his voice. Like something precious. Like home. I smiled. "I love you." The words settled between us with surprising ease. No fear. No hesitation. Just truth. Declan closed his eyes briefly. The kind of expression people only wear when they have spent a long time hoping for something they were afraid to want. When he opened them again, they were shining. "I love you too." There it was. The answer. The destination hidden inside every difficult mile of the journey. Declan reached for my hand. This time there was no crowd watching. No family assembly. No impossible choice. Just us. His fingers intertwined with mine. Warm. Certain. Familiar. Then he leaned forward and kissed me gently beneath the rain. Nothing dramatic. Nothing rushed. just a promise finally spoken out loud. We stood there together for a long moment afterward, foreheads touching, smiling like two people who had survived the storm and finally found the shore. Across the harbor, lights shimmered against the water. Months ago, I ran through this city terrified and alone, chased by a future I did not understand. Now I stood in the same rain with someone who chose me freely and whom I chose just as completely. And for the first time in a very long time, the future did not feel like something to fear, but something we would walk toward together, hand in hand.